Hey team, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to learn how to write SQL functions in PostgreSQL. This is a great skill to have. I hope you enjoy this video. So it all begins with create or replace. Then we have the keyword function, and then we have to give it a function name. Now you can call it whatever you want. Normally I start off and say fn and then a function name. So we're going to say fnMID. And then what we do is we have the options to configure our parameters a couple different ways. On this first video, we're going to do it the most simple. So we're just going to give the data types. So I want a varchar and then 2 integers. And that pretty much is the signature for our function fnMid. Then we're going to say returns. Make sure you put that S on the end, and then varchar. That's my return data type. Then as, and then you give it a $, then close it with a $, and then say language, and then our language that we're going to be using here is PLPG, and then SQL, and then put a semicolon there. Now these dollars, what they do is they just block your source code. You can actually put a word here in the middle, like a demo, or any word that you want, or the name of this function might be a good name, or you can just leave it blank. However you want to block your code is how you use the $. Then once we get inside of our code, we use the block begin and end. And now we're going to actually write our function. So remember, we're going to return a varchar. So what I'm going to say here is return the substring. And notice here, I did not use a variable name. So the placeholder only has the data types. So here I'm going to say $1. $1 goes for this varchar. Now $2 is going to be our starting location, and $3 is going to be for how long we want it. So this is our first function. You have to admit that was pretty easy. Let's try to compile this, see if it works. Ready? And we're successful. Now let's execute this. So you say select. Now what is the name of our function? It's fnMid. So, and now we've got 3 parameters. Now the first one I'm going to use is the word software. Now the next position is, where do I want to start? Well, the S is 1, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the W, that's at position 5. Now from 5, how many characters do I want? Well, I want war. So that'll give me 3 characters. So I'm going to highlight that, execute it, and we have war. Let us make a small change to this program just to make it a little bit more readable. The first thing we're going to do is going to add a 1 to this function name so we can just have a copy of it. Now notice here I'm only using placeholders, so $1 is for this varchar. Inside of the code, I really don't know what that is other than $1 right now. So come after the $sign and say declare. And then I'm going to say it's the word. And then after the word, I'm going to say alias, and then for $1. So the word 1 now is going to be used instead of $1. So notice here I'm saying $1. Well, I don't want to say that no more. I want to say word. Now what we can do is we can add several more, and we can say, what is the next one? Well, that is start position. And then we can say alias for $2. Now you're already starting to see a pattern here. I'm now looking at this second spot, so we're going to call that start position. Now we might as well finish this up and say the len at alias for $3. And notice len will be for this. Well, let's call that count here. So notice it's a little bit more readable now, right? Word, start position, and then your count. And let's go ahead and try to build this. Execute. Everything is good. Now we're going to say select star from function mid1, and then use the word software. Begin with 1 and end with 4. Let's just do of. I want to start at 2, and it's for 2 characters. Let's do it. And there we have it. Let us make a small change to this program just to make it a little bit more usable. So we're going to rename that to fnMid2. And then notice here, I didn't use a parameter name. So now I'm going to say buffer. That's going to be the name of this first parameter. And the next one is going to be my start position. And then the last one is going to be the length, so len. Now notice here, I was using that as a placeholder. Now I can use, like good names. Now I can say, okay, my input is buffer. I'm going to start at the start POS, and I'm going to use it for the len. So let's go ahead and re-execute this. All right, successful. And now I'm going to come and call that a 2. And notice we have our same input. I'm going to start at position 1, and I'm going to go for 4 characters. So let's execute this. And we got stop. Let's speed up life a little bit. I'm going to introduce you to templates. And every time I want to create a function, I would go to my notebook and I would go grab this code and then I would paste it in here. So I never have to type this again. And notice here, I have another template. It is the if statement. I never want to type that again either. So I recommend you do the same if you want to just speed up doing, programming. So let's copy that, Control C that, and let's see how that works. So I'm going to come here, paste that in there, and notice I have the structure to create my next function. Now my first one is, what's function name? Well, I would say fnMakeFull. Now my parameters, look at this, field name and data type. So my first one is going to be called a first name, and that's going to be a varchar. And then we say last name, and that is also a varchar. Now returns, notice it's asking me what is the return data type, and that is also a varchar. Then I come down to my begin and end, and this is where I have to be smart. Type in function body here. Okay, so now let's look at my templates again. I got to do one of these. So let's copy this and never have to type that again, and paste that. Let's tab that over. So now it's telling me my first condition. So I'm thinking about first name and last name, and I want to make a full name out of that. So I have like a couple conditions here. So the first one I would say, if first name is null and last name is null. Now what am I going to do if it's both of them are null? So I'm going to return null. So return null. Now how about we copy that because it's almost the same statement, and I'm going to say, so if this is not null, then I'm going to return the just last name. And guess what? I got to do this whole statement again. So Control C that and just swap those. So now this is not null and this is null. So I'm going to return first name here. Now in this else condition, if everything fails up here, this last else is going to execute. And what we're going to do is, this is where we're going to concatenate the first name and the last name. Now there's several different ways to do that. Let's look at the first one. So I'm going to say return, let me see, we're going to say first name, last name. And there's my function. Let's see if we can get a blue ribbon here. Okay, I did it. Now we're going to do a test. Select star from, what is the name of our function? fnMakeFull Fred Sanford. And let's execute that. And notice we get him Fred Sanford. Now I told you there's a couple different ways to do this line, and let's do the next way. Well, our next way we can do is we can use a function called CONCAT WS. Now the first parameter is, what do you want to put between all of these things that you want to concat? So I say I want to put a space in between every one of them. So if I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other parameters here, between each one of these, it will put this pattern here. Notice in this case, it's just a space. Now here you can see we only have 2 fields, first name and last name. So it's going to put a space in between those. So I'll say first name and last name. And put the old semicolon. Then let's recompile this. Then let's execute this. And notice we've got Fred Sanford. Now, if you guessed it, there's another way just to use concat and take that off the front and then like Now, between every one of them, I just have to put the pattern there. So I'm going to put the pattern space and then last name. So between everything that I want, another is just going to concatenate this whole list of fields together. Let's go ahead and compile that. And then let's rerun that. And notice we got Fred Sanford. Now I would like to show you one other little feature when we're dealing with names. It's like, it'd be nice to make the capital F, capital S. And what we can do is we can come here and say INITCAP and then open, close. And now that I have it on all of them, let's just go ahead and finish that up here. Bang, bang. All right, nice. And then let's come down here and say Fred. Let's run that. Let's execute it. Capital F, capital S. Let's learn about parameter types. We're like really talking about direction. Now I'm going to come back over to my template file and notice I have another template that I can use. And it's about parameter types. So we can say in. Now in is the default way to do it, and normally we never even say in. And then there's out, and then a combination of both in and out, and then however you say this word. Now all this word really means is a variable number of arguments. So then look at that, we just got our basic template to use. Let's write our next example. So we're going to start off with the function name, and it's going to be fnSwap. And then what is our parameter type? Well, we're going to use INOUT. And then the data type and the field name. So how about we say num1 as an int, and then INOUT num2 as an int. And then we're just going to have to write this body. Now the body is kind of simple here. We just say select num1, num2, and then watch this. Into num2, num1. So notice num1 is going to come in here, and then num1 will actually go to num2. So we're going to swap them. Let's go ahead and execute this. Notice that we created the function, and then we're going to say, now let's execute our function. So select fn swap, and let's swap 10 and 20. So when this comes back, it should come out 2010. Let's do that. And there it is. Now, you know, we can do this one other way. We can say select star from there. Now we got individual fields. Let us get our template so we don't have to start from scratch. Let's paste that in there. And then we're going to start with our function. Let's call that fnMean. And notice here my field name and data type, I'm going to show you something else that we can use in PostgreSQL 14. We're going to say numeric, an array of them. And then my return data type is going to be numeric and as, okay, cool. And then now we're going to declare some variables. So I'm going to say declare total, and that's numeric. And we're going to initialize that to equal 0, semicolon. And then val numeric. And then count as an integer, initialize with 0. Now watch this, n array, that's the name of it, and I'm going to say as an alias for $1. So notice here I did not give it a name of a variable. So what I'm going to say is n array is an alias for $1. So inside of my code I don't have to use $1, I'll be able to use n array, which is pretty sweet. Then we come into our for loop and it says type in body. This is where we have to get busy. So now it's kind of simple. Now we have an array. Now when you're thinking arrays, you're thinking of probably looping over them. So we'll say for each val, that is what we define on line 6 here, for each val in array. Now what is the name of my array? Well, before I did this, it would be $1, but now I have this variable. We can just use this n array. So n underscore array. Then we're going to say loop, and for every loop, we have an n loop. Now, what we're going to say is, remember that total line that we did here on line 5? So here I'm going to say total equals total plus val, and then count plus 1. I need to know how many elements are in that array. And once we have that, I can say return total divided by count. Now that right there gives you the mean. So you sum them up, you divide it by the number of elements, and that is the mean. Let us now try to compile this SQL statement, and then we'll say execute, and notice it was successful. And now we can do our first test. We can say select, what is the name of our function? fnMean. And then we're going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to do an array, and the elements 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Well, quite simply, we know that the average here would be 30. So let's see if this will compute that. And the mean is 30. And there you have it, team, passing an array to a function in PostgreSQL. Let's now perform a return query. We're actually going to query one of the tables I have in my database. Look here, from my file, I already have a template, so we can just get this thing rolling. I'm going to copy this. Let's paste it in here and get going. Now it starts off the same, create or replace function. Now here's my function name. Now my table is actually called movies. And from this table, I'm going to go query the movie ID, the movie name, and the year release. Now my input parameter, I'm just going to query this release, the year released, and get back some values. So let's write a function fn get movies by year, and then our input parameters will be the year, and that is of type integer. Now notice here I say returns table. Table is the table definition from movies. I'm going to right click on movies and then go down to scripts and then say create, and that will generate me a constrict file. And now I have the name of my columns and the data types. Since I want these first 3 columns, I'm just going to harvest some of this code so I don't have to type it in, and then I'm going to drop it into mine. And I don't need not null, I don't need this, and I don't need this. So this is the table I'm going to return: the movie ID, the movie name, and the year released. Now as, and then notice I say return query. So now we're going to select the columns from this table, and notice my input parameter is year. So I got to use that there. So let us just come here and rewrite that. So I'm going to say select, and then notice it says here table alias is mandatory. I just can't come into here and say select movie ID, movie name, and year released from table, and the table name was movie. Now I just can't do that. What I have to do is I have to alias this out. So I can either do this, create an alias, and I'll just call it M, and then come over here and say M dot, and we'll just copy that down. Or I can take this whole word movies and put it in the front of each of these. So do which one that you prefer to do, and you have to do one of them. I don't like seeing this because it makes my SQL all long. I like using these little aliases. So M and M. But you've seen both ways now, and hopefully that'll work for you. Now we're just going to say our where clause. So I'm going to say where M dot year released equals, now what was the name of my parameter? It was year. So equals year. So notice here, we're going to delete this one, and we don't need this statement anymore. So return query, here's my SQL statement, and these columns have to map up to these. Let's now run this to build it, and notice that we got blue star, everything is working. Now let's try to execute this. To execute that, we just say select star from, what is the name of our function? And then what is my input parameters? We'll say 1995. And then we'll execute this. And guess what? We got a bunch of data. And that's a wrap. SQL functions for PostgreSQL. Is this a great skill to have or the greatest? I hope you found this video informative, but if you have questions or comments, please leave them below. That's all I have, team. I look forward to seeing you back in my next video. Take care.